This is just blunt, but it's true. Sometimes it's because churches are disorganized. Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast. So glad you're joining us today, whether you're watching or listening. Hey, we're going to pick my brain. I tried this last month. You had a great response to it. And so we're taking young leaders' questions here on the podcast. I collected them on social media and inside my Art of Leadership Academy. So we're going to get to as many as we can today. It is a Pick My Brain episode. Well, last month, we kind of focused more on personal questions about you as a leader, like what's going on inside. This month, I'm going to tackle your church growth and organizational challenges. Hey, if you are watching this on YouTube, I am giving away a copy of my book, At Your Best, How to Get Time, Energy, and Priorities Working in Your Favor. 5 lucky winners are going to be able to pick up a copy of this free. So to enter the giveaway, just leave a comment on this on my YouTube saying, I'm ready to live at my best. All right, you type that into the comments and my team is going to pick 5 lucky winners. If you're listening to this, hey, head on over to YouTube, subscribe to the Carey Nieuwhof channel and leave your comment and you're good. Now, wherever you're listening to this, I want to welcome all of our new listeners, all of our new viewers. We're really glad that you're here. Man, it's one of my favorite seasons. It's spring, the warm weather is coming. I got a new bike. I'm going to be listening to a ton of podcasts as I am racking up the miles around my community. I'd love to know what you're doing as well. So wherever you're listening, hit the follow button, subscribe, drop in the comments how you listen to this podcast. And before we dive into the questions, here is a word from our very carefully selected partners. Today's episode is brought to you by Upward Sports. So I've got Travis Vaughn. He's a director at Upward Sports. Travis, I'd love to know, how does Upward help churches connect with their community?
You know, sports is a great connector. And by offering an intentional outreach ministry like Upward Sports, you get to engage families around your church and build relationships with them. You know, I like to do this through numbers. And so I'll give you some quick numbers here.
Sure.
You know, our leagues generally run 10 to 12 weeks. And within each one of those weeks, you get a practice and a game each week. And our average size across the country across all of our different sports is 160 players per league. And
Wow.
we know through some of our statistics that 51% of those people that play in our leagues are completely unchurched. And so what that means there is that with 160 players, 81 or so of those players on average are going to be completely unchurched. Those players are going to bring 3 other people with them to game days. That's 240 more people that's going to come to your campus. And they're going to come about 20 times throughout the year between those practices and games. And so it's a great chance to build relationships and to connect with your community. We think sports is just a great way to do that.
Well, Travis, thanks so much for sharing with us today. If people want to learn more, you can go to upward.org/Carey. That's upward.org/CAREY to learn more and get involved today. Okay, let's dive into your questions. So Graham, who's part of my Art of Leadership Academy, asked this. He said, is there a natural ceiling that the church cannot grow beyond regardless of scalability or structural changes? If so, how do you determine your top end potential? Graham, I don't get this question a lot. I really like your question. I want to suggest to you, Graham, that there are 3 factors, okay? There's the capacity of the leader, the size of the community, and then how you structure for growth. So let's break those down one by one. Capacity of the leader. So Graham, when I was in seminary, there was a buddy that I would golf with every Monday. Why? Because pastors golfed free. And I remember one round in particular, my friend Andrew turned to me and he just said, you know what, Carey, here's my theory of leadership. Everybody's got a number on their back. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I just think like maybe your number's 200. That's just what you're designed to lead. Some people have a bigger number. Maybe their number's 1,000, 500, 10,000, whatever. And maybe your number is 50. I've never forgotten that. And it kind of resonates. You look at some of the past podcast guests we've had, like a Craig Groeschel or Christine Kane or Chris Hodges. They've got pretty big numbers, okay? Like when you're reaching 70, 80,000 people, millions of people cumulatively in your ministry, Mike Todd, someone like that, it's a big number on their back. Now, other people are more like shepherds, okay? So their number isn't as big. They're not really into scale. They're not motivated to go and read how to grow and scale. So some of you are shepherds. And I think that's something you really need to acknowledge. And maybe your number is 50, maybe your number is 60. I think you can learn along the way. I think you can maybe do things to expand your number. I definitely had to expand my number. What I've learned about myself, for example, is that I'm okay with a large audience. I don't mind speaking to thousands or through digital means, millions of people. But I tend to do better with small staffs. I mean, some people listening to this podcast have 500 staff. Awesome. That's great. I think I would melt down. I love a small team. Right now, we've got 3 or 4 people on our team. It's fantastic. It's great. I love it. It's manageable. It works for me. Large audience, doesn't bother me at all. So that's a little bit about my number. So I would look at that. And then are there ways to manipulate your number? Well, yes, there are. I'm going to get to that in just a minute. Maybe, you're saying, okay, right now I just naturally kind of land at 100 people, but I want to reach more people, right? Because that's a mission of the church. Well, awesome. We will talk in just a minute about how you can expand your number. Okay, but first, I want to talk about the size of your community. So we talked about the number of the leader, like what's your number? And then next, let's look at the size of the community. So obviously, if you're in a big city, chances are you can reach more people. If you're in a small town or a rural municipality, you're going to have a smaller church. But it doesn't always work out that way. So think about it. And you already know this, right? There are big churches in small towns and tiny churches in huge cities. You can be in New York City. There's a church that meets on Sunday morning. It's got 28 people in it. That's it. I've been in major cities with almost no people inside the churches. And I know of some small towns that have huge churches. Like I remember there was one town in Ohio, pastor I've known, and I think the church was maybe 10,000 people, but he had a church of 1,300. So that's kind of interesting. So how do you know your potential? Well, here's what I would suggest. Do you remember back in elementary school, high school, they had this thing called a drafting compass? Okay, it was just like had a little point on it and then another area for a pencil, 2 arms, and you could just kind of make it wider or smaller, and then you draw a circle around it. So think about that drafting compass is what it's called, and draw about a 30-minute radius around your church, okay? That will tell you your total addressable market or your potential reach. So within a 30-minute drive of our churches, there's about 400,000 people. There might be 40,000 near you. There might be 4,000. There might be 4 million. I don't know. But that's probably the potential of the people you could reach. You should try to reach all of them. You're not going to reach all of them, but you can reach a percentage of them. So I think about my friend Matt, town of 10,000. He's got a church of 1,300. All right. That's amazing. Can he see 2,500? Possibly, but that would be about 25% of the town goes to his church. That would be amazing, like Guinness Book of World Records. Is he going to reach 100,000? Probably not in his location, but you can probably do more. When, I started in our churches, our community population was about 16,000, and we saw that grow to a church of about 800. So that was, not bad. It wasn't quite 10%, but it was a good percentage. Within a 30-minute drive, there were maybe 150,000 people of the original churches. Now, nice thing about living in the era that we're living in now is you've also got the internet, right? You can do a podcast like this from my basement. If you're watching, this is my basement. We have millions upon millions of downloads. So you've got a bigger reach because of the internet. So that's something to think about. And what I want to do is I want to go to the question under the question, because sometimes questions like that can reveal a mindset. I'm not saying this was Graham's mindset, but a lot of times people are kind of saying, you know what? Well, I just have a small church, a small town. I really can't grow. That is a mindset issue. And I would not want to put a limit on what God can do through you. God can do anything, and God can do a lot through you. I remember in my congregation, right? So this is sort of the potential part of it. Like, what is your mindset? My congregation, we were in a rural community at the time of 16,000, and the chair of our elders came by. His name was John. And John said, I'm just afraid you're going to go to some big mega church in the US. You're going to leave us here. And I remember being caught off guard by the question. And I don't know why this came to me, but this came to me. I just leaned over the desk. I was sitting, he was standing. And I just said to John, I said, you know what? I want to build the kind of church where nobody has to leave this church to realize the dreams God has given them. Now, that was a number of years ago. I'm still part of that church. Now, do I travel all over the place? Yeah. But you got to have a big mindset. So you got to look at like, what's your number? You got to look at your geography, but you got to look at it. Remember, there are really big cities with tiny churches and small towns with big churches. So don't let that stifle you. And then think about your mindset and how that impacts your potential. Okay. Next question. Russell wants to know, how do you help a small church with big potential get motivated to reach the community? Well, the best way I know how, Russell, is to ask this question. Do you want to create a church your kids and grandkids will love? That's it. So you got a small church, it's got potential, but people aren't really motivated to reach the community. You can say we want to reach 1 million people, but people aren't motivated by that. I mean, maybe they are. You're gonna, the leaders who are like, yeah, let's go. But for the most part, people are motivated by the things that matter to them personally. And I remember coming to the original churches as a young leader, and they were small, 6 people, 14 people, 23 people. And I was 30 and they were all like 70, 75. And I thought, okay, how do I motivate these people to do more? So within a few months, I just started asking the question, hey, do you want to, because they were saying, our kids don't come, our grandkids don't come. And so the question became, hey, do you want to create the kind of church your kids and grandkids would want to attend? And for the most part to that, the answer is yes. Now, you're going to get some pushback. I remember there was one woman, she was maybe around 80 at the time. She was really sweet. Her name was Helen. And we had an elders meeting, and Helen was there one night. And she just said, when I was casting vision for the future, and we're going to have a church that's going to reach hundreds of people, thousands of people, and there's so many people nearby, she just looked at me incredulously and she said, Carey, I know everybody in this community, and they're all old, and they don't have kids, and they all go to church. I'm like, okay. And I didn't want to like embarrass her or say anything publicly. I'm like, all right, point taken. So I went home and I did some research. I went to government websites, and I came back to the next meeting with my homework. And I said, Helen, thanks so much for your point. I really appreciate it. I did some research. There are 5 elementary schools here. Did you know that there are 70% of the people within a 30-minute drive of these churches have young children at home, their parents with young children at home? She was shocked. Now, when you're 80, okay, probably you think everybody else is 80 and everybody else because you're a Christian goes to church. I'm not blaming you for that, but you can get into that kind of mindset, right? Where people think, well, I don't really have anybody we can reach. And her kids weren't interested in coming to church. But, when the answer was no, I just had to share, well, here are the facts. And then she's like, oh, okay. So you may want to do some research and show people that more is possible. But the best way I know how is just say, hey, do you want to create the kind of church that your kids and grandkids want to attend? If you want more on that, if you go back to episode 634 of the podcast, I interviewed Daryl Kripe. And he talks about a variation of that question. He says, hey, who's your one? He encourages everybody to say, don't think about people, don't think plural. Think about one person you want to meet, one person you want to reach. Get personally involved. Who are you building into? He has seen that turn over so many people who are not motivated. I really hope that helps. All right, let's go to the next question. Christopher wants to know, how do you balance respect for tradition with a clear need for change in a dying organization? Man, very thoughtful phrasing of the question. You got respect for tradition, don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but you have a clear need for change. Like clearly this is only working for the handful of you who thinks that this is good because you're in a dying organization, right? I remember talking to a Disney Imagineer once, and you think about Disney, it's a 100-year-old company now. What do? Like the Mickey Mouse of 1928 is not the Mickey Mouse of 2008 or 2025, right? It's not the same. And he said, this is what we do at Disney. He says, you want to honor the past, but don't live in it. I thought that's great. That's a great mantra for congregations. You want to honor the past, but you don't want to live in it. Now, that said, you're going to have to make some hard calls. When we were moving out of the original historic buildings that we had into our first building that we built together when we amalgamated these 3 small churches, I was a young pastor. I had to make some decisions. And I made them with the elders, and here's what we decided. We decided, even though people love traditional worship, in the new building, there was going to be no organ. In fact, we had t-shirts made up that said, become an organ donor. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. But anyway, that you're young and stupid, so that's what we did. And as we were building it, raising money is really difficult. It was my first 7-figure campaign. It's like, you're exhausted. And there was a guy who came in to see us mid-construction one day, and he could see, the windows going in. And he just said, hey, I want to give you a gift of $30,000. Now, as a young pastor, I'm like, okay, you have my attention. $30,000 is a lot of money. And he said, but here's the deal. You got to make a stained glass window in memory of my mother. And I remember standing there having to make a call a few years into ministry in the moment. And I just said to him, thank you, but no. Thank you, but no. No, we don't do designated giving. That was like a policy shift in the moment. I just made it up. And I think that was the right call. He was offended. He left. But I thought, as soon as you do that, then you get the memorial wing dedicated to so-and-so and the so-and-so library, and you end up making all of these ministry decisions that you don't want to make because there are strings attached to the donations. And so we kind of said no. And then we had a small room where we took a couple of items from the previous buildings and featured them in a tasteful way. But it was very much a building about the present and the future, not about the past. And the principle underneath all of that, because it is a very thoughtful question, is you got to remember the mission is sacred, but the methods aren't. And particularly when you have a dying church, what usually happens is they've forgotten the mission and the methods are sacred. Now, I want to get to the other part of the question. You also ask not just, what's the philosophy behind it, but the question is how? How do you do it? Okay, so the number one hack I've got on this is very simple. Focus on why twice as much as the what and the how. There are 3 questions that show up at the leadership table on a regular basis: what, how, and why. Why gets forgotten and everybody focuses on what. Well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? I don't agree. I think we should do this. Well, how are we going to do that? That doesn't even seem possible. We don't have the money. What, you're going to do this? No, not that in our church. See, what and how are very divisive. Why unites. Why is, well, remember, we're trying to build a church for your children and grandchildren. We're trying to build a church that the person you're investing in wants to attend. We're trying to reach our community. Remember, 70% of people in this community are parents with children at home. Hey, we want to reach them. And here's the thing about why. People can endure a lot of pain if they know why, right? So maybe you're tightening your calorie intake and heading to the gym 4 days a week. That's not a lot of fun. I've done it many seasons in my life, including this one. But you're doing it because you want to have the freedom of great health, because you want to feel good when you wake up every single day. Or maybe you're taking Amazon off your phone and not eating out because you want to have financial margin and freedom down the road. So it's like, yep, not going to make impulse purchases. We're going to eat at home. We're going to do rice and beans because I know in a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, the payoff is going to be huge. People can endure almost anything as long as they know why. So when you're casting vision for your church, whether that's a small group, your elder board, volunteers, or Sunday morning, you want to focus on the why twice as much as you want to focus on the what and the how. Okay, next question comes from Josh. And Josh wants to know, how do you lead as a pastor when the head elder is micromanaging you? Woo! Okay, this is a spicy one. Josh, I'm going to be blunt. This has got to change. You cannot be micromanaged. That is a very unhealthy dynamic. I'm guessing it's not a very large church because very rarely will a church over 1,000 have a micromanaging head elder or an elder with that much power. So Josh, this gets down to the question of, is there a clear governance framework? Right now, I'm guessing this isn't a particularly large church because once you get to 1,000 people, you have to have a clear governance framework, and that almost never involves a micromanaging head elder. But in a smaller church, there's sort of what's written, like what does your constitution or denomination say? But then there is what's practiced. And often what is practiced is not the same as what is written. And what you have to get is a clear governance framework. So I knew we kind of let it slide until we got to about 400 to 600. And then I realized, no, we need clarity. And we followed the model of staff-led, elder-guided, people-gifted. And that was a vision that I cast to the elders. It was part of our then association, still our association with North Point Church. And that's it. Staff-led, elder-guided, people-gifted. Not everybody was on board with that at the beginning. But I said to them, look, if it's staff-led, ultimately me as the lead pastor, I am responsible to you. And you can't reach around me and go fire someone you don't like, okay? But if I'm making bad decisions, if the church isn't accomplishing its mission, if I'm making consistently bad hires, if I'm allowing the church to be financially mismanaged, fire me, okay? I'm accountable to you, but I'm going to lead this church. You're going to guide it. You're going to keep its mission within the guardrails. You're going to guide it. I'm going to lead it. The people's gifting is going to power it. And we got clarity on that. Now, once you get that kind of clarity, all right, what happens next? Well, let's say you're a church of 500 and he doesn't back off. This is what you got to do. I'm assuming it's a him. Maybe it's not. You got to have a direct conversation about the lines between board and pastoral responsibilities. And if that doesn't work, he may have to go. He may have to go. That's tough. When we got really clear about our eldership, there were some elders that really didn't like that model, and we had to rotate them off. We had to say, thank you for your service. We appreciate all that you've done. You're welcome to attend here, but we're going to move in a new direction. So hope that helps with that. Michelle has got the next question, and she says, when you're low on volunteers, which ministries do you focus on? So Michelle, I'm going to flip this on you, and I'm going to get to a question you didn't ask, but I think it's probably going to help more than you realize. So what I would do is I wouldn't focus on, okay, we only have this many volunteers, so we're going to shut this down and we're going to do this. Maybe you have too many ministries, but what you probably have is a culture issue, all right? So what you want to do is you want to focus on your volunteer culture. If you don't have a lot of volunteers, it's probably because you're not asking for volunteers in the right way or because you are not caring for volunteers in the right way. I'm not judging you. I'm just saying I've seen this pattern 1,000 times. I've fallen prey to it from time to time. But here are 6 reasons that you don't have the right number of volunteers and you are losing high capacity volunteers. Reason number 1, the challenge isn't big enough. All right. If you want to attract really great leaders, volunteer leaders, you got to have a big challenge. You got to have a big mission. Like we have an empty slot is not a mission. Got to have a huge challenge. And if the challenge isn't big enough, then you're not going to attract high capacity leaders. Second challenge you might be having is that your vision, mission, and strategy are fuzzy. We've kind of hinted at this already. But you know what really attracts people? A crystal clear mission, a crystal clear vision, and a crystal clear strategy. This is what we're called to do. This is what we see. Here's how we're going to get there. You clarify that, and the leaders, their ears pick up. They go, ooh, this is cool. Big challenge, clarity. Okay, third reason, maybe you've attracted some high capacity leaders, but they quit. You've got a high attrition rate. Why does that happen? A couple of reasons for that. And this leads us to the third reason. And this is just blunt, but it's true. Sometimes it's because churches are disorganized, right? If you get a high capacity leader, they're like, I am ready to lead small group. And you're like, great. Small group curriculum is available Sunday at noon. As soon as we're done our services, you know what that high capacity leader is doing? Going to their keyboard, opening the laptop. They're looking for it at noon. And you're like, oh, sorry, it was a bad day. Like we didn't get it out till 1:30 or 2. Yeah, but my group meets at 1. A lot of staff are very disorganized and they promise things and they don't deliver. And you know what high capacity leaders do? They ask you once or twice, like, hey, can I get that? Can I help with that? And eventually they just kind of, I'm out. Thanks. So if there's any level of disorganization, and I've taught this to church leaders and you see the light bulbs go on, you probably need to address that. So the fourth reason is you let people off the hook too easily. This is a culture question, and this is a hard one. I could do a whole podcast on this. By the way, if you want a whole podcast on this, just type in the comments, I want a whole podcast on this, okay? You let volunteers off the hook too easily. A volunteer comes in late, and what happens? They will say things like, I'm so sorry I'm late. And what does the average leader say? The average leader says, that's okay. Never do that. Never do that, right? Because what you've done is you've dishonored the time of everybody who showed up on time. So you really don't want to do that. And I can explain that. If you're interested, just say, I want a whole podcast on this, but that's just a sub point. You got to hold volunteers accountable the way you would staff. And I know that really rubs people the wrong way, but high capacity leaders, if you're disorganized, you're letting people off the hook, they're going to be like, hey, I'm going to be nice about this. I think I'm out. Okay. The other thing is you don't have enough other high capacity leaders around them. You get one high capacity leader, let's say someone who's CEO of a company, the mom who's just supercharged in her neighborhood, whatever. What you want to do is you want to pair them with another high capacity leader quickly, because people are asking the question, do people like me do things like this? And if they find other people, there's going to be a synergy there. So you want to go and recruit 2 or 3 of them. That'll really help. So those are 6 reasons why maybe. I know that's not exactly the question you asked, but if you deal with that, you're going to have so many volunteers, you're not going to know what to do with them. When we made those changes, we got to a surplus. I remember going to the team saying, all right, we're going to do a volunteer drive. They're like, yeah, we don't need one. We got plenty, because people don't quit and it has a way of attracting people. All right, last question I think we have time for today. Martin, again, from the Art of Leadership Academy. This is about staffing discernment. And he writes, how do you evaluate who to keep and who to let go? How do you navigate firing well? I did a whole teaching on this on my YouTube channel called Stop Tolerating Mediocre Church Staff. And it's all about A players versus B players. So if you want to drill down on this, I would encourage you to go look at that. We'll include a link to that in the show notes. But here's what you're looking for. You're looking for a team of A players. And how to know who to fire and who to keep is you want to look for A players. So who are A players? Well, these are people who are self-motivated, okay? They take ownership without being asked. They're like, I can train someone in a skill set. I have never effectively trained someone in motivation. You're either motivated or you're not. You either have to be reminded all the time, hey, work starts at this hour. Hey, that was due yesterday. Or someone's like, hey, I got this done early. All right. A players, I got it done early. You didn't need to ask me. I got it done. By the way, I saw this problem and then I saw this one too. So now it's done. When they come to your office, they don't just come with problems. They come with solutions. They're like, all right, we got a problem here. Here are 3 possible things we could do to solve it. Which one do you suggest we follow? See, that's an A player. B player shows up and goes, I just got problems. Or, oh yeah, I was busy. I got distracted. Okay, I'll get to that tomorrow. A players elevate everybody around them. You know what research shows, and they've done a lot of studies on this in business schools and Netflix. A lot of this I've learned from Netflix is A players call out the best in others. When you see a high performer on your team, other people kind of, say, oh, I got that in me too. I want to do better. If you're at the gym with somebody who really knows how to work out, you're like, yeah, I'm not going to quit on this set, okay? B players can bring out the worst. If you have someone who's a little bit lazy or mediocre, other people go, yeah, I don't have to try as hard, all right? A leaders are always growing. They're always learning. You don't have to motivate them. They're self-starters. They get energized by obstacles. When they see an obstacle, they're like, we're going to figure out how to tackle this. They also, here's another clue that you've got an A player. They ask for feedback because they are obsessed with getting better. I'm not saying I'm an A player, but I remember being in the law firm. I worked in law for a year. And I'm like, I didn't know. I'd never worked at a law firm before. So I walked into my boss's office after a month and I'm like, hey, I want a performance review. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And he's like, weird. And I'm like, no, I want it. I want it. And I look for that in employees now. It's like, do you want to know how you're doing? And they will always ask, how can I do better? That's what an A player does. And then Netflix talks about the keeper test. So if you're really wondering, who do I keep? Who do I let go? Here's the keeper test, okay? Keeper test is, if somebody told you on your team that they're resigning today, how hard would you fight to keep them? It's a great question. Some people, let's be honest, you'd be like, whew, I don't have to fire you. That's great. Awesome. Some of you would be like, oh, that's too bad. And some people, you're like, I'm not going to sleep tonight. Like I'm going to need 3 people to replace that person. If you're not going to sleep tonight and you've got 3 people that you've got to replace this person with, you've got an A player. So that's the keeper test. Now, second part of your question was, how do you fire well? So the good news is I actually addressed this in my last month Pick My Brain episode, so I won't repeat myself. Joey asked the question, and it's about the difference between, are you firing for cause, not for cause? They should be least surprised, et cetera, et cetera. All of that is in the last episode of Pick My Brain. So I hope that really helps. Now, let me just say this, something I didn't say in the last episode. Often when you're terminating people, what you want to do is you want to be very generous, okay? Most people, you're never going to fire them for cause. You're going to have to fire them for what they legally call not for cause. I covered that. But you want to give them a generous severance package. And when you do that, it probably mitigates your likelihood of being sued, but it also means that they kind of leave with their dignity. And about dignity, it's really important when you terminate someone that you don't just read the riot act at them. I probably did that a little bit too much at the beginning. And here's why I did, I'm letting you go and you weren't good at this and you weren't good at that. People remember those words for the rest of their life. And I made some mistakes in that area in the early days. And what I learned over the years is you got to let people leave with their dignity. And so you want to say, this isn't really working out. I'm really sorry. We're going to let you go. We're going to be generous about this. We want you to land well. Unless someone's really toxic, it's like, hey, you can be part of this church. We really love you. It's just not going to be in a staff role. And then when you're announcing it publicly, say less, not more. I get this question quite a bit. People are like, should we announce that we just let someone go? It's like, generally, no, right? If somebody is in the maintenance department, you don't need to announce that. If they have a visible role, like maybe they're a teaching pastor or the lead pastor, you want to say something, check with your attorneys, say less, not more. Church people can be very gossipy, but you want to let someone leave with their dignity. And the cool thing is, if you do this well, for the last, 15 years or so, from time to time, we have to let people go at our church. And other times people just resign, they're like, okay, I'm done my time going into corporate. But what's really cool is I can't remember the last time one of those people left our church. They attend. Even if we said, hey, this isn't working out, they still attend. That's what happens when you let someone leave with their dignity. You treat it with discretion. Okay, so those are today's questions. Let me know in the comments on Spotify, YouTube, whether you like this format, you like the Pick Your Brain. If you do, I'm going to do it again. Or if you want, send me an email at carey@careynieuwhof.com. And hey, if you enjoy this kind of back and forth, you got to check out my premium private community, the Art of Leadership Academy. When you join, as thousands of pastors have, you get unlimited access to expert guidance, proven strategies, and you get a really awesome community of church leaders, some of whom I answered their questions here on the podcast. I answer them pretty much on the daily inside the Academy. You can check it out at theartofleadershipacademy.com or by clicking the link wherever you're tuning in from. Next episode, we have got Chris Hodges. He talks about stuff he has never talked about publicly before, leading with an inferiority complex. And he opens up about being bullied, his insecurity, and how to foster a successful succession. Chris, I just love it when leaders you really admire and respect talk about stuff like that. Also coming up, Kyle Eidelman, powerful interview, Amy Anderson, Derwin Gray, Ashley and Jamie Woolridge, and a whole lot more. Thanks for listening. And hey, if this episode has been helpful, make sure you hit follow, leave a review or comment wherever you're listening, and please share it with a friend. We'll catch you next time on the podcast, and I hope our time together today helped you identify and break a growth barrier you're facing.